This conference will now be recorded.
Part two. Then you thinking about the
This conference will now be recorded.
Okay, so welcome to the last week of our positive psych class. And I apologize to the people online because the camera's not working and so I can't, you can't see me. So I've put in some requests for help. We'll see if it comes, but you'll just have to look at the slides for this week. So I want to get started and ask you, first of all, thank you all for coming to Kathleen's. That was wonderful. I thought that was great what she had to share with us. But want to ask, what were you able to do with increasing your resilience last week? And this is where we learned to have our talk back statements. That's not true because, another way of seeing it is the most likely outcome. So I wonder if anybody was able to use that in their week last week.
I feel like, so last week and going into this week, I should say, I've started to get up at 4 o'clock in the morning because I've been forcing myself to say that it's what I'm gonna do, right? So I'm tired at about this time. I had a full day already, but I'm like, okay, I don't want to look at it as I have to get up, or not necessarily I have to get up, that I'm getting up at 3 o'clock. I'm looking at it like I'm starting my day early than everybody else. You know what I mean? And I'm putting in more work before the average person gets up, and I think that itself will have the effect that I'm looking for.
Okay, so and how does that relate to the talkback statements? Is that what you're saying? That your talkback statement is this is what you choose to do?
Right.
Okay.
And so I can't remember the statement, so forgive me, but it was saying like, what were the two statements?
Well, there's three. It's that's not true because, so yeah, we're looking to catch some beliefs about ourselves, right? So we're looking for the ABC, like what is the belief? And then when we find that belief, we want to say that's not true because another way of seeing it is, and if we're worried about the future, we can say the most likely outcome is.
Okay. So I feel like it's the second one. That's
another way of seeing it.
Another way of seeing it, right? So like I said, I'm getting up at 4, and I'm like, yo, I'm dead tired. Like I don't really want to do this. But at the same time, like, well, look, another way of seeing it is that you're putting in more of effort before anybody gets up, and that'll pay off.
That's great. Okay, so another way of seeing this is getting up at 4 a.m. It's really going to pay off.
Yeah.
Right, you're going to see some results.
Right.
Okay,
right.
Great. And what I also hear in your answer is a little bit of agency from hope. When we talked about hope, creating the alternate pathways and agency, like I'm meant to do this, right? Mm-hmm. So I hear a little bit of a little bit of that in there too.
Yeah.
Okay, great. Anybody else? Yeah.
I know, well, I was able to suggest another way of seeing it is to my twin. She was pretty caught up in the circumstances, and that helped diffuse the energy a little. For me, a different, more organic word choice was, it was really hard to find parking last night, and I was really exhausted from my day. And I had to move my car before 9 a.m. and I just wanted to sleep. And I had a coaching call at 9 a.m. too. And so there was a little bit of like, does it really have to be this hard?
Mm-hmm.
But then I'm like, you know what? And then just like within like 10 seconds, just as soon as I was done saying the more constrictive, negative version of like, life isn't aligning with me. Then I was like, oh, you know what? The universe is actually supporting me to wake up early because now I have like more incentive to get my butt up and be ready for this call. And so then like immediately, it was the same stimulus, but a different perspective. And that totally changed the alignment.
Okay, that's great. So this another way of seeing it statement has been helpful for both of you.
I feel like I've gone through all of them last week or so, just with all the changes going up in our department. And now that we've had 3 teams and we've come into one big one, I had a full support from my director before, and now it feels like I don't. But I've been telling myself, it's what I've been telling myself in my head. So I've been telling that's not true because he's actually going through his daily work stuff, and he still does check in. So it's like kind of reorganizing how things work. And
another way of seeing it is this is a newer relationship that has to be developed like the old one was.
Yeah. So I've gone through it myself, and I've also gone through it with some of my colleagues who've been upset about the directors that are now no longer there, thinking that they deserve to be there, and I was like, and I kind of twisted it in a way, like that might be true, but another way of seeing it is this person also has this and this and can help you with this, from my personal experience.
Great.
With that director.
Yeah, so you had a lot of challenges last week. So this is just right in time, right?
Right in time.
Okay, great. All right, so today we're going to talk about optimism. The very last part of PsyCap. And optimism comes from traditional psychology, cognitive behavioral therapy, rational emotive behavioral therapy. And this really is building up what we learned last week. There's a relationship between thoughts, feelings, and actions. So we're going to just take it a little bit deeper. I feel like there's a lot of similarities between hope and self-efficacy, and there's a lot of similarities between resilience and optimism. So beliefs are related to optimism. It's the lens through which we see the world. We develop schemas, mental models, scripts. But to feel differently, we have to think differently. So traditional clinical psychologists will work to change the belief to help people overcome depression, anxiety, right? But we can also use the same tools to be more optimistic. So remember positive psychology, not going from suffering to zero, but going from zero or maybe a little bit above zero to flourishing. All right, so just a reminder, the self-fulfilling prophecy is you have a belief such as I'm a bad salesperson, the behavior is you give up trying to improve, and the result is lack of sales. Or you can have a growth mindset and your belief is selling as a skill set. Your behavior is practicing and learning the skills, and then the result is more sales with time and practice. Okay, what optimism and pessimism, that should say, are not. It's not a character trait. So it's not who somebody is, but how they're thinking. So you don't want to say they're an optimistic person, but they have an optimistic thinking style, because we want to stay away from labeling traits, you know, oh, they're really pessimistic, they're a pessimistic person. They're using a pessimistic thinking style, right? And just a reminder, when we're saying he's such a pessimist, we're really in judger mode from our growth mindset week. Okay, the other two things are optimism and positive thinking and positive psychology are not sticking your head in the sand, right? So we don't, I'm sure you've met the optimistic person that's just blindly optimistic and it doesn't really seem wedded to reality, which I find slightly annoying because I really want that to be tagged to reality. And so we don't want to stick our head in the sand. We want to be wedded to reality. Now, why is optimism important? People who have more optimism experience less distress. They're less likely to suffer from depression and anxiety. They adapt better. They have higher psychological and physical well-being. They have more health-promoting behaviors and better physical health and lower risk for heart disease. And we'll talk about kind of why this happens this way. It's because optimists exert more continuous effort and tend not to give up. So if you have a pessimistic view, like I'm never going to lose this weight, I'm never going to get this promotion, that's the effort you're going to expend right there, right? But if you believe it's possible, you'll expend the effort. Optimists also learn lessons from negative experiences. And I was teaching growth mindset yesterday, doing a corporate training, and we were talking about going on the learner path and what I've learned from this. So again, really tied to using the learner questions and seeing what can you learn from even a negative experience. And I shared an example of a really strong negative experience where I lost thousands of dollars on a bad lawyer who gave us incorrect advice and failed to file the, you know, just did a host of things. But once it happens, there's no recourse. And, you know, and I was reflecting that years ago, I would have been really angry. This probably would have been like a good month or two of being mad about this, but I was able to flip it and say, just really kind of scoot past all of that anger and say, all right, what I learned from this is I need an in-person meeting every week. And I kind of went through and just kind of looked at it from my side. Where could I have known this was going to happen or headed it off at the pass? And when we got a new lawyer, it was like, all right, we're going to do these things. And we felt really good about it. And we ended up getting a discount from the new lawyer because she knew about the old lawyer and knew how bad she was and felt really bad for us. So, being pessimistic wasn't going to change anything but make me feel bad, right? And so I just kind of skipped over that feeling bad part, which I think in the past I'd have really just hung on to, that would have been really justified and deserved that, I was angry, but it really, just moved on with my life and it was fine.
Dr. Thompson?
Yes.
I'm curious because when you said optimists learn lessons from negative experience, it just reminds me of like Jordan's quote, like I never lost, I always learned. And I'm curious, is there any relationship with like confidence and optimism or anything of that? I hear that quote a lot in sport. I've heard it a lot actually recently across all different professions. I've never lost, I learned. And I never knew it was tied to optimism.
Right, and I see them all being related, but this is really important, and I want to take a couple minutes to explain PsyCap in general. And I have all of my dissertation students do work on PsyCap, so you can read any of these dissertations and find out more. But what we know about PsyCap is these four things: hope, self-efficacy, resilience, and optimism are a higher order second factor, meaning that they synergistically work together, just like the factors of transformational leadership or any other construct, right? So they're stronger and they're distinct, but they relate. And so we have a tool called PsyCap that we use, that we can measure this. And when we measure it holistically, we know that higher PsyCap is related to positive organizational attitudes, satisfaction, all sorts of stuff, behavior, org citizenship behaviors, and it is related to performance, right? So the higher your PsyCap, and you can think about it, if you set goals, if you are confident and resilient when things don't go your way and you see things optimistically, you're a higher performer. And then the research with my students, we've shown is that it increases engagement. And engagement is a precursor to any of these business outcomes. So they do all relate to one another. Yeah.
So it was hope, self-efficacy, and
Resilience and optimism. And in the field of positive psychology, there's a lot of stuff going on the clinical side and the school side. And the school side has tremendous resources. And I think they have a group called IPEN. It might be just positive education. They have a great group to join. But the thing with PsyCap is Fred Luthans looked and said, hey, what are the positive psych constructs that relate to business? And he set forth some criteria saying, okay, they're measurable, they're reliable, they end up in good things, meaning it doesn't tear you down, it's not like a competitive type thing. One of the key characteristics is it had to be trainable, right? So I think it's useful to think of each of these characteristics as there's some level, genetically that you have, but any of these things you can develop and you can do further, just the same way we talked about happiness, right? And so I have different levels. Actually, my optimism is my lowest on my PsyCap score. And it just is, but I'm really strong in hope and self-efficacy, right? Which ties to some of my character strengths of things that I naturally like to do. You look like you have a question.
Yeah, do you feel, so this is really interesting. So I feel like PsyCap is something you should do in your life, not just at work.
Oh, absolutely.
Do you feel that sometimes work bringing it in and teaching PsyCap or doing it with the intentions to increase, higher performance or engagement, they should more do I just want to make you as happy as a person as possible to do this at work. Is it hard for work to provide this ICAP training?
Well, I don't know. I'm the only person I'm the only person I know that's providing it.
Gotcha.
So, for me right now, I'm trying to sell it and show that it's important.
Right.
I know that Fred Luthans does it in Nebraska and some other places. Like, I'm sure there's other people doing it. But right now I'm just in the phase where I'm trying to convince people, like, hey, here's all the research. Let's,
So how would you present it, like, if you were a leader and you bought your services, like, to everyone? We'd be like, hey, we're bringing this in because we want you to be as effective and happy as possible at work? Or, like, how would you, because it's interesting, you know what I mean? It's like, I feel like it's right between, like, that kind of that church and state line, like, that similar.
Yeah. Okay. I see.
Because I feel like to really do, for me, what's been awesome about this is that I've got to practice it in my real life and, kind of figure it out. And now I can implement it in my work life at maybe a more higher stage.
Right.
The lights are on now, so I kind of have to operate it in a better, but I can mess around with, like, little things at home.
Okay. That's a lot of questions. I would say one, I tie it to positive culture, because I say if I train your leaders and they're using these techniques, they're going to be inducing more positive emotions. We know that that's a stronger performance. So that's kind of what I'm working with, but I would say my marketing has a long way to go. As you know, as I was sharing with Kathleen, like, it's something I struggle with because I have a PhD in IO psychology, not in business and marketing. So at some aspects, I have taken out the sciencey stuff, and I go to clients and they're like, yeah, we want the sciencey stuff. And I'm like, rats, the marketing people told me to take it out. So, I think for me, that's a struggle. But here's what I'll say. When I do the trainings, I go in and I've gotten the question like, yeah, this is great, but this isn't really going to work. And I'll say, I always say, this is for your personal life, your work life, this is for everything. And I think one of the reasons, I like it so much as I can say it's made such a change in my life, right? So I can tell you it's changed me, and you can use it in both. Now I'm here to teach you to do it in work. Like right now here, I'm to teach you to do it to school. The school would like me to increase your PsyCap because you will do better in school and you're more likely to succeed, right? But hopefully you take it and you teach other people, right? That's the pay it forward, give it away. Hopefully you'll help other people, but obviously, hopefully you use it in your personal life too. Yeah, Victoria and then Deanna.
And it kind of relates to how to explain this to people, but when you said genetics is part of it, like a very small part of it, but.
Well, it's 50%. Yeah, and then the what we can change is 40%.
What I read when I was doing early childhood education and how they teach on having that positive experience within the classroom, and how they labeled it was really cool to me, was how they labeled this genetics as the blueprint, but the positive interactions, those positive social interactions is the foundation.
Or even making the building.
The building
yeah.
That pulls it all together and it provides for further learning and development, helps all around it. So I thought that was this was another way of explaining it to what people can understand. Okay, you got the blueprint, it's you, but then here's the foundation.
Right, and you can build it low grade or high grade, right? So yeah, I mean it's right.
And you think about the three little pigs and how one had a very not as good foundation, how you build it.
Oh, very good. That's a great explanation. DeAndre?
Well, I kind of wanted to answer Cody, and I was just going to say that since I started taking this class, I started doing it at school with the middle school kids that I teach, and I saw some of the effect that they had, especially with the increasing what was it?
Savoring and gratitude, I think is what you were, yeah.
And I was like, I bet. So what I want to do, and I think it'll be helpful, for the community I come from, where we always talk about the fact that we lack hope. I want to see what it'll look like if we can turn it into a training program. So Dr. Thompson and I were talking about my becoming a trainer and potentially taking it to my neighborhood to see exactly if the effect is in fact true, And so that's one way you can look at it, is that for communities that are particularly lacking of hope, you know what I mean? There could be some profound effect. And so I definitely want to take it to where I'm from. In fact, I talked to the principal at the school, so
You're ready.
Yeah.
That's awesome. All right, let me run through this. I want to make sure I've got a lot of slides to go through. I want to make sure I get through everything. This is a great discussion. I'm glad there's so much enthusiasm. You know, I'll just skip over this. Basically, being optimistic and being very optimistic are great for sales in every industry. However, there are a couple of fields where it is it's good to be pessimistic. One of them is law. Unfortunately, they also have a high suicide rate. I'm guessing it might be the same for dental because dentists have a higher suicide rate too. And positions where risk aversion is a necessity, right? So being on the lookout for something that can go wrong is necessary for some jobs, right? So you don't want the nuclear power plant manager to be blindly optimistic, right? You want them to kind of look for what's wrong. However, it does come with a cost, right? And that is you don't feel great. But the interesting thing is I find pessimistic people really are like, when you talk to them, they almost have some pleasure in feeling pessimistic, right? And I don't know what that is. Okay, here's why pessimism is challenging. It promotes depression, and I think this is the biggest thing. It produces inertia rather than activity, right? So you feel bad and you don't do anything. And it feels bad subjectively. You're blue, you're down, you're worried, you're anxious. Being pessimistic doesn't feel good. And it's a self-fulfilling prophecy. Because if you say, hey, this is terrible for me, and you don't do anything, then it is terrible for you, right? And I think that's a little bit about what DeAndre is talking about, and that in communities where there are low resources, you can say, hey, there's low resources, there's nothing here for me, and stop. But if you say, hey, there's low resources and I want to fight for more resources, it's more likely to change. Okay, here's the kicker. Even when pessimists are right and things do turn out badly, so if I'm like, I'm going to fail this test, I'm going to fail this test, and I'm going to fail this test, they still feel worse when it comes true because then it's a disaster, right? So it doesn't feel good. And although I do know a couple of people who are like, I was right, I told you so, and they really kind of derive some satisfaction in that. But again, when we look at the health benefits and the well-being benefits, being pessimistic is not great. Okay, so I want you to pair up and think back to any activating events from last week. Any new ones, maybe the one you used with your partner last week, maybe a new one that's come up. List some of your beliefs that you may have discovered, like were you able to, as you share, discover, and then see if there were any pessimistic thoughts. So I'm going to give you just like 2 minutes for this, a minute per partner.
I think that's really thoughts about having enough time to get everything done. I feel like everything piled up. And I was like, I couldn't sit and spread out. Or why did I plan supporting it? Why did I effectively do my time? Because I was had the whole semester. So it was a stress-free one. And then now it's first time about stress. And so I started having some negative thoughts about it. And then I realized. Yeah, 2-3 hour time slot, so they have to do it all at once. But yeah, I had some negative thoughts. I had to just be honest.
You know what? I would, to piggyback off that, I would actually say part of the reason why I'm getting up at 4 in the morning is so that I can now try to get me a schedule going, right? So part of it, and even that, the thinking of that is that, so I work on contracts right now. The obligations I have, and some of the other community work that I do is on contracts, that not well-paid contracts, so like that. You come over in the morning, got to do it in the morning, got to challenge with. I'm gonna start doing this in the morning, right? Like 4 to 8, right? And I'm like, okay, that's gonna be my live time, 4 to 8, 4 to 8:30, and I'm gonna go hit the gym, and then I'm gonna meditate after that, right? If I have time, whatever the case may be. And so, and then thinking basically the same way, can I just go there? like, oh my money, I'm trying, like, what am I gonna do, you know, like, I'm trying to do all these things, right? I'm too fat. I mean, you know, I gotta, and so I'm just trying to look at all these different aspects of myself, that I'm just like, oh, gotta work through, you know. And,
Okay, switch if you haven't already switched.
so I'm pretty much, when I started it, okay, start with the first step first. Get up in the morning. Go work your 4 hours. Hit the shower, you know, try to wake up. Then head straight out. No, you know what? So I actually living with my lady, so she's still there. Yeah, she's still there.
That's one thing, there's like 4 things I do, like routine in the morning, that's probably my day.
Okay.
But now, if I don't do one of those.
Okay, were you all able to identify like 1 or 2 pessimistic thoughts?
You know, and I look at it, you know, that looks good, you know, you look at it.
Were you all able to identify 1 or 2 pessimistic thoughts?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. All right. This group 2?
Yeah.
Yep, okay, all right, let me. Okay, so here are the steps to optimistic thinking. Great news is, 1, we've started with understanding and identifying mind chatter. We're going to do a little more with it today. Also practicing the ABC model, which is what we did, identifying beliefs from last week, and real-time resilience, right? So resilience is really related to this. But what we didn't do is understand explanatory style. So we're going to work on that today. So just to review, your mind chatter, your explanatory style can come from your mind chatter, thoughts, beliefs. It's a self-talk or automatic negative of thoughts. And all mind chatter, you know, we just talked about it broadly last week. I want to give you some more science around it. All thoughts can be broken down into 4 clusters. There are factual thoughts, there are fantasy thoughts, future thoughts, and judgment thoughts. Okay, so factual would be, I'm hungry, which is true. Fantasy would be, what's for dinner? I wonder if Pete or whoever will be home soon. Future, what if he's home late and I wait for him to eat and then I'll eat late at night and that's not good for me. I'll gain a lot of weight, I won't be able to work it off, right? Then judgment, Pete doesn't care how late we eat, he doesn't have to worry about his weight, right? So you can see how we can go from a factual thought to fantasy to future to judgment, right? And nothing has happened, just it's all in your head. And so what's interesting is the facts going to fantasy is really a lack of mindfulness, right? Having future thoughts is really anxiety, you're worrying. And then judgment, it leads to anxiety because you're worrying. And then judgment thoughts lead to depression, right? It doesn't feel good to be judging. And then also like it's, Pete doesn't care about me, right? Now I feel bad, right? Now I think bad of Pete. I think he's a bad person and I feel bad, right? Because Pete doesn't care about me. And all of this stimulated from a simple mind chatter of I'm hungry, right? So we worked with last week the what next thoughts and the why thoughts. Let me just actually skip through this slide. And this one too. But basically there's different results and we didn't go into too many particular details, but kind of understanding why that happens. All right, so now I want to give you a minute each with your partner to talk about the types of thoughts that dominate your mind chatter. So did you look at this and go, yeah, I tend to be here, I tend to be there. And then do you see the tie that I'm talking about to how it makes you feel, right? So each partner gets a minute.
Back to the definition of all
Yes, I will put that back up. Great idea.
Yeah.
Okay.
For me, it's the same. Same. It's the
I
future.
think I'm a little bit more in the, a little bit of the future,
I'm looking at it now.
mostly the last.
So yeah, it's the future thoughts. Like,
But there is a lot,
you know,
some anxiety.
too much weight to come off. You know,
Thinking.
not being able to earn enough money, like just different things.
I, with my parents.
Not right here, you know, just like.
Right away,
Who David Goggins is?
getting anxious
I heard.
as to why and kind of predicting.
He's a social like
Little things.
in the
Maybe not.
darkest time. And there was like said like here the tunnel, there's a lot of that tunnel. There was sometimes the tunnel so long. Like you just start from it's like really cool and then if you stand it, you start to make out figures in the darkness. And he was a Navy SEAL for a while. So he talks about compared
Yeah,
to
see, I'm trying to remember.
real stuff that they did. It was kind of, he made me
But yeah,
appreciate the dark
Yeah.
in a different light that I've never saw it before.
I think it's you know, you made the lesson about making your bed. Have you ever seen the Navy guy?
Yeah.
Man, that speech cold.
Yeah.
It is, man. It's a powerful speech, man. It's like about making your bed. Yeah.
I
Man.
read it somewhere, I think I read like.
Yes.
I saw the speech, I was like, I didn't do it in hotel rooms. I always wondered what the legal is.
And I got.
Yeah, right. Making my job hard. Sometimes I like want to write a note, but like it's just my routine, I'm sorry.
Yeah. No, that's cool though. Yeah, you know what? I mean, and a part of what I've been telling myself and other people that I talk to is like, look, this is where I am. You know, I'm trying to really grasp the fact that I work off contracts and I don't make as much as I like, but I know that I have to do certain things to get there. But I'm like, I'm just trying to form good habits in my life. That's right, and that's what I keep telling myself.
Okay, so let me bring you back and ask, were you able to link it up?
Yeah, I mean, it was very.
It's so obvious,
Yeah.
right? Yeah. And I was sharing online, like I had some pessimistic thoughts this weekend about our childcare reduced and less, you know, it's like less hours. And so we're struggling, we're trying to fit everything in and, you know, canceling this and canceling that. Oh, you know, we don't have time. And I immediately went into judgment about what other people are doing and how much other people are holding up their half of the, you know, work, whatever. And I felt bad. And I was also like grumpy, right? And it was commented on, oh, you're really grumpy, you know, today. And it's sort of, well, it's funny. And I'm like, yeah, I am. And then we come to this class and I'm like, oh, right. Because, you know, so it's funny. In my mind, I thought I was going through the facts, just less time. But really, that's not what made me upset. It was the judgment, right, of someone else. I'll let you guess who. So, all right, so the last thing, explanatory style. This is really the heart of optimism. So, a habitual way of explaining the good and bad events that happen to us. So, when you explain why, there's the 3 P's of explanatory style. 1 is personalization, where it's about yourself. 2 is permanence. It's always this way. And 3 is pervasiveness. It applies to every aspect of your life, right? So if I don't know if I have some. So the personalization, like, so what we want to happen is when something good happens, to cultivate an optimistic thinking style, we want to say that was due to me, right? Which I think sometimes oh, it's bragging. But like when you get that promotion or you get a contract or you experience some success, a good grade on a test, you say, that was me, that was my hard work and my skill. And when something bad happens, you say, it's not me. It's a situation. I could have studied a little more. You know, I'm going to learn how to do better when I compete for contracts or whatever it is. Then the next thing is permanent. So I always do bad on tests, right? You want it to be always when it's good about you. Like I'm pretty successful at school. I always seem to do well at school. But when you do bad, you want it to be not always. Like it's this one instance. It's not everything in my life, right? Have you had that experience where something bad happens and you just immediately go like, like it's all, it's all bad. Everything's just, And again, remember that's that negative spiral downwards. Remember the first week we learned about the positive spiral upwards and negative downwards. Parking.
The street cleaning, I'm like, I always am the one that like gets it, but not every, like that person will be there and they won't get it. Like, it's like the luck of the draw, who's coming to get this.
You know what? If there's anything that could produce pessimism, it would be the Chicago parking tickets. No lie. Yeah, that threw me when I first moved here. I started putting something in my calendar that pops up the day before. So I just warn everybody in the household.
Well, you even see like the poles that like you don't park beyond this pole, and so many people will park past it, and I'm like, if we were to park there, we would get the ticket. And they park there, they don't get this.
I'll tell you a funny story. I do that, but somebody told me this, and that is like if your car's halfway through or it's like to your door or something, it's okay. And I was explaining this rule to somebody else, and they were like, where did you learn this rule? And I was like, well, that's just the one. And they were like, I think you made it up. I think literally that this is your own rule that you made up, but yeah.
There is a website that there's like many different rules that the enforcers have to follow, so people can.
Go there to
My
protest.
boyfriend who works with his boss had told him about this, that he's gotten out of probably 80% of his tickets because he contested following this set of rules, because if they don't follow this rule list, then you can get it.
Yeah.
That's great. Yeah, share that list with us. Okay, so the last thing, this pervasiveness, this everything, not everything. You want everything's good and for, to you, and then not everything when it's bad. If you get a parking ticket, your whole life doesn't stink, right? But if you experience something great, you get a parking discount, you're like, yes, and these good things are happening in my life. Okay. So an optimistic explanation for a failure is it's not me, other factors were involved. It's not always, bad events don't last, and it's not everything, it's just this one circumstance. And optimistic explanation for success, it's me, it's due to my hard work and effort and my skills. I tend to be pretty successful in life, and I'm expecting this is going to go on. And good things are happening to me and spill over into other areas of my life. Okay, so now take a look at the pessimistic beliefs that you just shared with your partner, and figure out how you can change them to be internal, permanent, and pervasive for success, and external, temporary, and specific for failure or setback.
It's not gonna be like this forever. It is just a temporary, yeah, storm coming through, it's all going to settle out. And I guess it's not everything, it's just one level, like the whole business is falling apart.
It's like internal, that way, especially for like what you're doing right now, and from a permanent,
Right, that's what I was.
So same thing, like.
The future's not yeah.
Do any of that, I can simply explore daily interactions. My opinion. That.
I think that everything you say is say that they can't exist concurrently. They just can't, you can't make this a part of you, say, I want to go through this, and they think that I can't get through it.
Oh, I didn't do that.
Yeah.
I like that.
That's right. You know?
So.
Yeah.
Okay, so let me ask for some examples. Anybody able to turn it around a little bit? Yeah? Do you see like maybe where you tend to go to something? Like, I'm sure you don't know do all three, but like you might rely on one. All right.
It's a lot easier to set it back. I think, to realize how easy it is to set it back, I guess. Because like I realize now that it is a temporary thing, it's not always gonna be like this.
Mm-hmm. Oh, to go, yeah, this is temporary.
This is temporary, it's an investment, we just have to like get through this week and to realize that it's not everything. It's not the end of our business, it's just our main focus is recruiting students, and that has nothing to do with what had just happened at this point. So like it's not everything, my job
Right.
is still the same, and I need to focus on that than worrying.
Right. And I also think in that situation, like also, like your what we would say your monkey mind was wanting to worry.
Mm-hmm.
And I think acknowledging your monkey mind and going, yep, my boss just changed. This is a huge thing because people don't leave jobs, they leave bosses, right? So this is a big impact into your life. And so I think it's really helpful to say, this is big, this is scary. I have, it's normal that I'm feeling this way. Okay, now what can I do? Right? So, what's your goal? Maybe it's like, I want to have a good relationship. What are some alternate, what are some pathways? Because I can see like, if you start to think pessimistically and then you sit back, you probably won't have a good relationship with your boss. But if you go proactively towards it and kind of do some of these steps, you could. And it could be that your boss like it doesn't typically have close relationships, but you could cultivate that and, kind of push it forward if that's what you want, So anyway, just a different thought. I also think it's just really important that when your 5 alarm thing is going up and having a different boss is definitely one of those that would do it. And it's just unsettling, right? So I think also being a bit mindful and accepting, like this is a very unsettling thing, right? So.
I think some people didn't see it that way, so that's a good thing to bring back. Because some people just felt like, oh, are you okay? And trying to glaze it over. And I know it's okay to feel upset. Let people feel upset.
Yeah, this is a big change, and I have a new boss. This is going to be a lot to adjust to, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so things we want to avoid. Optimism is good, pessimism is bad. There is one right style, or everyone should think this way. It's all or nothing. Remember, it's not a personality trait. An explanatory style, it is a thinking style. We can get stuck in a style. It can limit our perspective. It's learned, so it can be changed, and it can be used as a tool, and it helps us be flexible in our thinking, which is the goal of what we want to do. Okay, so we ran out of time because we had such a good conversation, but I want you to do this exercise. It is so important. It is life-changing. Please just do this for me. It's really important. What I want you to do is just take 20 minutes and describe your best possible future self. And just write as much as you can for 20 minutes. So just think about, like, if you want to think about your next year, like if everything went the way you wanted it to go and the way you wanted it to happen, I just want you to write about what would that look like.
Is there a time, like, don't go more than 3 years?
No.
Oh,
No, you can do it anytime, yeah.
Got it.
And I can tell you, I have done this for things that, you know, like, okay, this is what I want to happen. And then 2 years, I'll look back and go, oh my God, that happened, right? It's crazy. But I couldn't see what the possibility could be or what that thing could be for me without writing this down. So I always take the opportunity, like every 6 months, to do this. It's a very uplifting, wonderful exercise, great to use in class with students, with your students. So they say that you get the most benefit when you do it 4 days in a row. You just write for 20 minutes and then you just do it 4 days in a row.
Do you build on what you wrote the day before?
Yeah, I mean, you just write and you just get, you know, you mark by broad and kind of get into more detail.
And then timing was important too.
No,
No.
just roughly.
Cool.
I find when I write, like, I could go on forever, right? And then I'm like, oh, okay, it's been 20 minutes, I'll write more tomorrow.
I got you.
Kind of thing. Okay, so you're free to stay here and write in this room. I don't know if there's a class, but if there's not. But that is the end of our class, and I want to just say, yeah, and I know you're in operation, so this is different, but they're about to go into their final 3 weeks of class, and so they don't need, you know, now you get your time back to study for stats or do whatever. But please, you know, if you follow me, whichever, Facebook, Instagram, whatever, I still put posts out once a week related to this and other topics, so we can stay in touch and do that. And then you have the website. You can always go back and watch one of these videos if you're like, I don't remember what it was, or maybe I need a little boost of something or other. You've got the website, you've got the password, and you can go back and look.
Do you think there'll be any classes building on this?
That's a good.
Anything more next semester?
I don't think I'm going to do one next semester. I did character strengths. But you know, I think this spring people have less interest. I only had like 30 students. I had 80 for this last year, but there was something wrong with the distribution list this year, so it didn't go out, and I don't think a lot of people knew about it. But yeah, I'm not sure if I will, but I do have those recorded, so that it is something I could put up on the website if you're interested.
What, the character strength?
Yeah.
That would be awesome.
Okay, yeah, I could put that up, because the way that it goes is I do the first 3 weeks, positive emotions, gratitude, growth mindset, mindfulness, and then I do the 4 weeks of PsyCap. And in the spring, I would do the same 3 weeks, and then I did 4 weeks of character strengths.
I would love that, especially over like the holiday. Kind of fun to do.
Yeah.
Holiday break.
Yeah.
Cool.
What's your Instagram handle?
Jen Thompson LLC, I think. Instagram handle. But oh yeah, that's right. You're not on our emails.
No, can you add me?
Yes. Yeah, I'll add you. You won't be able to access the link without a TCS email. That for the videos.
Would you be able to send this?
Yeah, I can try. They're on our drive. Let me. Okay. Thank you guys, everybody online.
I think you could share a link, like a temporary link. That would allow me to.
I'm gonna just stop the recording.